Hello. So today we're carrying on looking through Jesus's teaching, starting at Matthew 5. We're going to be going through Matthew 6 and Matthew 7 as well. So plenty more to come as we just spend this time really going deep with what Jesus is teaching in this kind of section of the Gospels is all about. So much practical stuff here, so much life stuff here that Jesus really wants us to grab hold of. So today we're going to be looking at Matthew 5, starting from verse 21, going to verse 24. You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. So a bit of teaching there on murder, on anger. And you might be sat there thinking, well, I've never murdered anyone. I've never even thought or even given murder a thought in my life, other than maybe if I've watched a murder mystery or a police drama or something like that. Something that isn't really applicable to me. Or you might even be someone that, even when it comes to anger, might sit there and say, I'm not someone that really struggles with that. I'm not someone that is an angry person or holds on to anger or has that really as something impacting my life. Or you might be sat there knowing that anger for you is perhaps something you really struggle with, on how to deal with it, on you find perhaps you're someone that gets angry quite easily about different things. Wherever you're at on that scale, one of those extremes maybe, or somewhere in between, there is stuff in here that is so applicable for us wherever we're coming from. And I think it's really important for us to see what Jesus is trying to do here. He's already unpacked in the verses just before this of explaining to the Jewish people and the people listening to him that he has come to fulfill the law. He's not come to get rid of it. He's not come to say, don't do that, don't listen to that. He's come to add to what is already there, to make it even more helpful and applicable for the people. And this idea even of do not murder would have stemmed from the Ten Commandments, would be a massive part and would be in the Jewish law. And there would be various things within that building on that idea of do not murder and the judgment that would follow if people did, and what would happen to them, as Jesus kind of refers to in that bit of teaching where he says they will face judgment. And we could spend all our time this week just talking on what does he mean by that. Does he mean earthly judgment? Does he mean heavenly judgment? But actually, I really want us to get to the heart behind what Jesus is trying to say here, what he's trying to teach people. And we can see that what he's saying is I don't want you to live a legalistic way. I don't want you to live your life by going, I shouldn't murder, so I won't. I shouldn't do this, so I won't do that. I need to not do that, or I need to do that. And that is how I live my life. What Jesus is trying to say here is it's not just about those outward actions of I have murdered or I haven't murdered. What Jesus is saying is it's about the inward, it's about the heart. And as I've said, those few verses before, Jesus really starts to explore this whole idea of he's come to fulfill the law. And if you want any more on that and you missed last week's notes, go back and have a read or have a watch of the video Steve did for that, because he really unpacks that further for us to really get an understanding of what Jesus is trying to do here in terms of adding to and helping us see it's about the heart. And if we think of what murder actually means and and what it takes for someone to do that. In most cases, murder will come from a place. It will come from a place of anger. It will come from a place of hurt, of resentment, of offence, of someone feeling like they need to take judgment out on someone for something that's happened, rather than leaving that to God and leaving him to serve justice and judgment, or even, dare I say it, our legal system doing that, if it is that kind of way and applicable in that sense. And that hurt and that resentment and that anger that would result in murder might be miles apart, might be something that's quite small to start with, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and that feeling of anger grows and grows and grows till it comes to a place where someone acts in that way, in that what we would perhaps deem extreme way of murder. And what Jesus is trying to say is, let's deal with those feelings before it gets that far. Let's deal with that anger, with that hurt, with that resentment, so that everyone will benefit before it gets to a place where you have gone so far down that road. And there's a phrase Steve and I use all the time. We've talked about it many times here at Riverside, that we try to apply in our lives. And it's the phrase, refuse to be offended. And it might sound easy, it might flow off the tongue quite easily, but that doesn't mean it's always easy to live by that. We are all human. We are all going to get hurt. We are all going to get let down by someone at some point. There will be times, even if we're not predisposed to being angry people, that we will be angry about something. It might be an injustice, or it might be something that we see as real kind of righteous justice, righteous anger in that way. Or it might be just something else completely that we feel so angry about. And it's easy for that anger, for that bitterness, for that offence, for that resentment, for that hurt to take root. And Jesus is saying, if we act on that, it could lead to murder, or it could lead to something else before we get that far. But it's not great. It's not good if it comes out of that negative place and it's not righteous. And then he says this thing, even if you call someone raca or fool, is just as bad. And translation of that word raca is along the lines of something being worthless, of something being empty, of it not having any point or purpose. And if you're saying to someone you're raca, you're saying you're not worth anything. You are a worthless person. You are an empty-headed, an empty person. Not really a nice thing to say. But what Jesus is encouraging us towards is reconciliation, to not letting things get that far, to have positive relationships, to have restored relationships with people. And even if that hurt or that bitterness or that anger comes from a place of something that is so wrong, that is so bad, it doesn't mean we have to go back to being best friends. It doesn't mean that we have to go back to being best buddies with someone, but it means that we are reconciled. It means that it is not going to be held on to by either party, but we let it go. We refuse to hold on to that offence or that anger. Because what happens when we hold on to it? What happens when we hold on to anger and we're not restored with people? It damages us. It not only damages our feelings towards that person, but it can damage other relationships as well, because we hold on to mistrust. It means we hold on to what has happened there and we apply that without perhaps sometimes even realizing to other relationships with people, and we can become less trusting, we can become more wary, and then that also can then impact on our relationship with God, and it might head us towards that place of unforgiveness All of these things that I'm talking about here are things that probably affect us personally more than anything we think anyone else has done or shouldn't have done or has done, or how someone else has hurt us. Holding on to this anger, this bitterness, this hurt, this unforgiveness will affect us much more. And it can stop us walking with God in the way that He wants us to. Anger in itself may not be, and probably isn't, a sin in most cases. It's what we do with that feeling that where the sin comes in. It's how we let that feeling, that emotion affect us, affect our actions, where the sin can come in. And Jesus wants us to be free. He doesn't want us to be captive. He doesn't want us to be held back by these kind of things. And if you've been with us on Sundays recently, we've had 3 weeks looking at this idea of Jesus, our Redeemer. And to live as redeemed people means we live as free people. We live as people that are not held captive by things, and our anger can hold us captive. It can keep us in a negative place. It can lead us to negative actions, to negative behaviors. And Jesus is saying, deal with it before it gets to that point, before it gets to that place. Go and sort it out. Even before you come before God in worship, before you offer Him something. And in that sense, it would have been when people were offering sacrifices. But we can apply that to today and say, before we come before Him in corporate worship, before we meet with God privately and personally, if these things we're holding on to and are holding us back, deal with them. Deal with them. Be reconciled with them. And I just want to now perhaps help us in offering a bit of a personal situation that happened to me many years ago now. And it was within church. A situation had happened. I dealt with it in a certain way that someone wasn't happy with. And as I say, we're going back years ago at another church I was at. And we'd spoken about it afterwards. And as far as I was aware, we'd sorted it out, we'd settled it, we'd moved on. And over those years afterwards, with this particular person that had felt a bit hurt from what had happened and how I'd handled it, I'd had coffee with them. We'd spoken together many, many, many times. We'd done church together on a Sunday. We'd met privately. Steve and I had met with her and her husband. We'd had meals together. They'd taken us out for meals. They'd blessed us in different ways. We'd sat, read the Bible together. We'd prayed together, just the two of us, as well as the four of us, so many times over different things that were going on in their life, that were going on in our life. We'd done life together. We'd worshipped God together. We'd walked together in faith. And it was 2 years later, after that situation that had caused some hurt, that she came to me and she said, Liz, I want you to know, over these years, I have held on to anger, to resentment, to bitterness about you because of that situation. I was lost for words, and you know me, doesn't happen very often. I could not believe what she was saying to me. We were 2 years on. So much more had happened in that time. We had done life together, as I've said. I had no idea that this lady had held on to this. She had hidden it. It had eaten away at her personally inside. I thought it was sorted out. And I apologised to her and I said, I wish I'd known. We could have talked more. We could have talked it out. We could have explained more of where we were both coming from, of what we were both feeling, of what had led us to those feelings at that time. And it might have helped, it might not have, but at least you might have been able to let go of that pain, of that anger sooner, rather than living with it for 2 years and having relationship and friendship with me that now kind of felt like a bit of a pretense had been going on for 2 years. Now, I've not held that against her, and as much as we're not really in each other's lives now because we don't really live near each other, I don't hold anything against her. All I hold is sorrow and sadness that those 2 years for that person could have looked completely different. Her relationship with me, with Steve, perhaps even with other people, could have looked completely different if we'd managed to work it out, if she'd managed to let it go. And I just feel sorrow for her. And when she came to me, she wasn't even coming to me to ask me to say sorry. Time had gone on, and at no point would I have perhaps even have known, and I couldn't even tell you now what I'd have been asking her forgiveness for, because so much has gone on, and to the point that I can't even really remember what that initial situation was really all about and where the hurt and the anger had come from. It had just built up and built up and built up and built up over those few years that had become this massive thing for her. And she came to me because she said, I just don't want to hold on to this anymore because it's eating me alive. This really opened my eyes up to the fact that sometimes we have no idea what is going on inside someone else. Internally, we don't know. On the outside, everything might look fine, everything might look positive, and I'm not sharing this for us to question every relationship and think, oh, is there something wrong? Is there something wrong here? But almost to show you how, when we hold on to this anger and we don't deal with it and we don't sort it out, it can eat us alive. To the point that what we're even angry about loses all meaning, loses what it's even all about, to the point that me, the other person, had absolutely no idea the hurt that was there. I couldn't do anything about those lost years. And I pray for that person all the time still, because I love her. And I never want her to be in that situation again or holding onto it. And it's shown me how we need to keep short accounts. And we're going to look at that even more next week. So, yeah, tune in for that next week. But today, as we've looked at all this, just pause and have a think. Is there anything in you, internally, in your heart, a situation that you do not have peace on, that you're holding on to some anger or some hurt or some bitterness that needs dealing with? And Jesus tells us here, go to that person, like that lady came to me eventually. And as much as it was so far on, there wasn't much I could do other than say, I'm so sorry you've experienced this and I wish you hadn't, and I wish we could have talked this out sooner. Talk it out. It may be applicable to talk it out with that other person, or that may not be applicable. It might be the right thing to do to talk it out with God. In a sense, I look back at that lady and I think there was nothing I could do that would have changed those 2 years at that point. And she came to me after she'd taken it to God. And she'd taken it to God, and God had worked that out in her. And she just felt part of that was to then come and tell me. So I knew that there was nothing between us, that there was no ill feeling then, because she'd worked it out with God. And this is going to look different for all of us, dependent on the situation and what it is and what the anger's about. And I've already gone on way too long for these notes, but I want to encourage you, talk to God. Let him search your heart. Ask him to show you, is there anything that is taking root there? Do not let years go by where something takes root that will impact your relationships with others, that will impact a relationship with someone else because of what's been said, and ultimately will impact your relationship with God because of the anger you are holding on to, or the hurt, or the bitterness, or the resentment. A great prayer we can pray, and I'll finish with this. If we're struggling with feelings in this way, again, you may say, I'm not really an angry person, but I'm hurt. I've held on to that resentment, that bitterness. Is Philippians 4 verse 7. And I pray this so much for myself and over other people if they've come to me and said they're struggling with things. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Let's pray that. Once you've taken it to God, once you've acknowledged that anger or that hurt or that resentment or that bitterness, pray this. Ask God to fill that place with his peace and to guard your heart and to guard your mind so that it's his peace that is ruling in your life, not anger, not bitterness, not resentment. And I just want to encourage all of us. You may pray all of that and think there's nothing that's taking root. There's nothing there at the moment. That is fantastic. Let's keep living lives that are looking to Jesus, that are looking to him to be our truth, that we're not ruled by our feelings, that we refuse to hold on to offence or hurt or bitterness, that we are people that want to deal with it, keep short accounts and move on, because Jesus' truth and love rule our lives rather than any anger or bitterness. I really hope that encourages you today. If it is stuff you're struggling with, I want to encourage you to walk towards it. It may not be as easy as one prayer and it's sorted, but keep walking towards it. Do not let it take root within you. And let's live these lives of love and truth as Jesus wants for us, so we are not held captive. Thanks for listening. I really hope that has been of help, and I just pray for you as we walk and keep walking this path with Jesus. God bless.